Well, hello, Manchester, Auburn, Hooksett. This is the progress report for Wednesday, August 30th, the last Wednesday in August.
It is.
And by God, it feels
Summer
like September
is done.
right now.
Summer's
it really
done. Labor
does.
Day this weekend.
Labor Day
The
weekend.
big Labor Day AFL-CIO breakfast
Yeah.
brings the curtain down on summer. All we have left are remnants.
And we have a show we're very excited about today because it's somebody I had no prior knowledge of until I attended a rally in Victory Park. I think it was July 31st of this year, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a rally in defense of LGBT rights, which seemed to be greatly under threat. And the most dynamic speaker I heard at that rally was Rachel Booth, a transgender woman who is with us today from down in the great North Country. And I'm very pleased that she saw fit to come all the way down here to participate with us on the progress report for this last Wednesday of the summer, as I consider it. Never mind the thing. I think Labor Day is the end of summer, and has an incredible story to tell. And we're really looking forward to talking with her and letting her tell her story. But first, the highly anticipated
Our regular feature.
and now
It's a
regular feature
feature.
of the progress report. By the way, this whole thing is going to be sort of on the same theme that Mike's about to talk about when he gives this week's edition of the POTUS report on the progress report.
Well, we will certainly be talking about the president during the course of the show, but I tell you, I try to keep notes, and every week it's one thing after another. We heard at the end of last week that Donald Trump signed a letter of intent to develop a Trump skyscraper in Moscow. He signed that letter of intent in October of 2015, after he had announced his run for president.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, after that time, throughout the entire 2016 campaign, he insisted that he had, in his words, no deals in Russia, no interest in Russia, no business in
plans
Russia,
for
no
deals.
plans for deals. But he had signed a letter of intent.
Yeah.
And why do you lie?
Well,
And that's all I've got.
why did he lie? Because that's what he does. That's what he does all the time.
There I am. I did have a few others. I thought it was rather unseemly that, yesterday President Trump went down to Houston to see the devastation that Hurricane Harvey has wrought down there, and among his first comments were commenting on the size of the crowds that turned out to greet him. I couldn't get that.
And claimed that his administration's response was going to set the standard for the future, finding a way, as he always does, to make it about him.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But then today he's in Missouri, while thousands are in Houston shelters and thousands more are literally being plucked off their rooftops in Beaumont. And he's promoting tax cuts for corporations and rich people, and hitting the political trail, asking people to vote out Senator Claire McCaskill. So I don't know. I don't know. Those are the two things that struck me this week, Bob, about the president, and I'm sure in the course of the week, course of the show this week, we'll talk about.
We will talk about more, because there's other things the president's done that are very distressing.
Oh, by the way, Bob, I don't know if people remember, but do you remember we had a big hurricane called Hurricane Sandy a few years ago?
I don't think it was even technically a hurricane. It was
tropical, superstorm
Sandy. Yeah.
And,
I do remember that.
And when the bill came to provide disaster relief to the people of New Jersey and New York and from Hurricane Sandy, I don't know if folks remember, but it was 20 members of the Texas congressional delegation that voted against it, saying that it was pork.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, and you stepped all over my big line, but that's all right. The point is, folks, we're dealing with people who really are not tethered to any kind of moral decency. If it was wrong morally for them to vote for relief in Hurricane Sandy, then how can it not be wrong for them to vote for relief in their own state?
Right.
Now we know they're wrong on both counts, you know what I mean? But I just think it's just terrible the way these guys are playing politics.
Right. It's a disgrace.
So on with the show.
Rachel, I want to thank you so much for coming down from the North Country to be part of our show here tonight. And it seems very timely because we have President Trump, and I think this was the case when you spoke to the rally here, when he's recently affirmed it, is now saying he doesn't want any transgender folks to be able to serve in our in our military services at all. And, leaning on our, Joint Chiefs of Staff people to try and carry out his tweet command.
Well, at that time, it was just a tweet, but he's actually taken action on it. It is now an executive order.
Yep.
And by the way, there's stuff going on. There's the circus that we talk about at the beginning of the show, and a lot of things where he's not getting what he wants. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to talk about one of those things that's actually moving forward, taking place, and that's a problem.
There's so much we could focus on, but today I want to talk about with somebody who has lived a life of very great interest and a lot of accomplishments, and a very, very fine spokesman for people who do feel that they are born with the wrong identity and are therefore transgender. And I'd like to, Rachel, to tell us a little bit about yourself, your growing up, your background, and some of the contributions you made through your military service, and then your contributions through, being a very high-level person, apparently, to help our Defense Department with some important projects. You want to tell us about that?
I will. First, I'd like to thank you both for having me on. This is a great honor to me, and it was absolutely no trouble coming down here. I was going to ride my motorcycle, but it's a little chilly up there now, so
Yeah.
I thought maybe not.
Yeah.
I was born in 1905 in northwestern Ohio, and it was 51. Okay, I aged myself. Anyway, I knew by the time I was about 5 years old that I was not the person that everybody said I was supposed to be.
What was your name at that time?
My name was Ricky,
Ricky.
which is not exactly a very macho name
Yeah.
for a little boy to have. There was a little girl down the street from us named Ricky, and I thought, oh, isn't that great?
It's
We
Ricky
had
Lake, after
We
all.
had the same names.
Yeah.
But I used to sit, my earliest memory is sitting out behind our house in a little field, waiting for the first star to come out so that I could wish on the first star with the old Starlight Starbright thing, please make me a girl.
Yeah. By the way, I guess you kind of led me to do it. Rachel is a author, and this is the book she's authored. This is called Wishing on a Star, and the subtitle is My Journey Across the Gender Divide. It's a very attractive cover. There's some really interesting pictures of her in all phases of her life, from quite a youngster, a graduation picture from high school, I think, and this is an interesting thing. Maybe before the end of the show, we should tell people, if they're interested, how they can get this book.
Certainly.
But, that's an accomplishment to be a published author of a book like this and a very personal account. So go right ahead. Tell us some more about you. You explained the title of this book, but
Yeah.
continue your story.
Growing up, I thought that people were silly because they couldn't see that I was a girl, even though I knew that I was. I had a baby sister, and I changed her diapers all the time. And I noticed that I had something that she didn't have. And I thought, well, something's wrong. Mine didn't fall off yet. So I lived my life, through childhood, thinking that, when the magic age of puberty came, it would fall off and everything would be fine, and I'd go along being a girl just like I was
not
supposed
quite
to
that
be.
simple.
Did not work that way. When I finally realized that I had to do something because my body wasn't going to change, I decided to join the military. This was during Vietnam, and I knew my parents couldn't send me to college. They didn't have the money. And I knew if I got drafted, which I most certainly would have been, I would have been cannon fodder in the jungles of Vietnam. So I decided to join the Navy because that would be the least likely place for me to end up going to shoot people. The other reason for it was that I had resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to have to live my life as a male. Nobody other than Christine Jorgensen had ever done anything change, and that was just.
And this wasn't even in your radar that you might be a woman.
It was in my radar that I was a woman, but it wasn't that I could
see.
ever change.
Right. Okay.
And so I thought, all right, I'll join the Navy and I will be around other men and find my place in society. That didn't work out.
Tell us some stories about that, because I think you have some fairly dramatic stories about how tough this was for you to be in the. I mean, the Navy's a pretty, at that time especially, more than now, I would hope, a very macho organization.
Sure. Gay people couldn't be out in the service. I wasn't gay, but anything that was not normal was considered maybe gay, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, consider any woman that you know being put on board a ship with a bunch of men, and she's pretending to be a man, and she has to sit and listen to the men talk about what they're going to do with whores when they come into a port.
Yeah.
And they had contests on what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I got all upset, and I told him at one point, I said, you have a wife at home, you have a fiance, you have a girlfriend. How can you talk about things like this?
Yeah.
Well, we're men, and men have needs. And I said, well, what if they have needs? They better not. And then they started looking at me, asking me if I was gay. They didn't use that word. They used worse words. And I knew that I had to shut up, because if I didn't,
Yeah.
you could be hit over the head with something very hard and tossed over the side at night, never to be found again until they realized that you were gone 200 miles later in the morning.
Yeah.
So I had to be very quiet. I had to put up with it.
So that must have been a pretty horrible existence for you.
It was extremely lonely. The only thing that I could do to keep my mind off of what I was going through was to keep myself incredibly busy, learning, studying, working, whatever I could do to keep from thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody, when I was younger, had asked me where I wanted to be in 5 years, I couldn't tell them, because I didn't know if I was going to be alive tomorrow.
Really? You felt that threatened?
No, it wasn't threatened. I felt that it was a struggle to keep from committing
Oh, my
suicide
goodness,
every
okay.
day.
I
Threat to
understand.
herself.
Yeah.
I would drive down the road at night thinking, well, that's a big tree. I can run into that and make it look like an accident. Nobody will know. And this will all be over.
Wow.
That's a heavy burden. How many years did you
40,
go through that? Really?
40 years.
But your military service ended after 9 years, as I understand it. Is
Right.
that right? And then what did you do?
Well, the last 2 years I was in the service, I had been trained in the Navy to be a linguist, Chinese and Arabic linguist, and that was my job. I worked for the National Security Agency. If anybody remembers the Pueblo, that's
I do.
what I did. So it was dangerous.
Folks, that was the ship that was taken over by the North Koreans,
Brought into port and
brought into port, and eventually
Held hostage.
we did get the hostages back, but it was
Took a long time.
It took a long
Yeah.
time, yeah.
Right, and that's what I did. But the last 2 years I was in, they brought in this brand new thing called a computer. No one had ever heard of a computer before. What is that? I was bored. They said they needed somebody to learn how to program it, or whatever you did with it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I took some courses on the base. I was living in Spain at the time. And I learned how to program. And that got me a job when I got out. And I worked as a computer scientist, department manager, for the next 30 years in the Navy's Aegis shipboard weapon systems.
Now, was that a defense contractor as opposed to being, regular Navy?
No,
So
that was
this-
a defense contractor.
It was a defense contractor that had the contract to develop the Aegis guided missile system.
My company developed the software to make the system work. And Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, they changed names. They did the hardware, the radar systems.
Wow. So you must have had top security clearance to do this, I'm
Top
sure.
secret special intelligence, have to kill you if I tell you what I told you I did.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
clearance.
yeah.
Right.
And during this period, too, you have not come out and the public identified yourself as a woman at the core of your being, right? You
Right.
still did that.
Had you come out to anyone in the family, any close friends, or was this completely a solitary journey that you're on
I
right
came
here?
out to one family when I was stationed in the Philippines. And finally, it was getting so bad I had to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And I lost track of them after I got out, but finally ended up finding them because they had such an odd spelled Polish name that there was only really one person in the country that had that name. And I found them. And they'd been looking for me, but they thought if I changed, I was going to change my name. And they had no idea how to get in touch with me. And they're still two of my closest friends in the entire world.
So they at least were supportive, and that
They were.
it must have been wonderful to break the isolation you're in when you feel like your life is a lie in terms of your sexual identity, and then find somebody that you can confide in. That must have been a really, I mean, I hope after that you didn't consider suicide again, right?
That was constantly on my mind because confiding in somebody just meant that I was able to get a little of it, off my chest,
yeah.
but that didn't mean that it was going to be any more, I was going to be any more able to make the change because at the time, that was just unheard of.
Yeah.
When I finally made the change, 91, I finally gave up and I tried to commit suicide.
Wow.
And a friend of mine talked me out of it. And then I decided I can't let my life end like this. I have to do something. And I came to the realization that it wasn't courage that I had to have to move forward. It was conviction that if I didn't do it, I was going to die. And I knew
Wow,
that for,
that's pretty
for
heavy.
a fact.
That's pretty. So it was 1991 when
Mm-hmm.
you finally said, "I've got to come out and be who I am."
Right.
That's a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think you already kind of mentioned, it wasn't that common a thing that long ago. I mean,
unheard
that's
of.
unheard of.
Right.
And how did that go for you?
Well, I told my boss, I was a department manager at the time, and when he picked his chin up off the floor, we went to our human resources people, and these were all friends of mine. I'd worked there for over 20 years.
You're still working with the defense contractor,
Right.
Lockheed Martin or Raytheon,
Yeah.
whatever it was, yeah. Yeah.
And one of the people that they assigned to me was a woman that I'd never met. And she said, "I don't understand what you're going through, but I tell you now, I will put my job on the line before I allow this company to discriminate against you in any way."
Wow.
So, and it was
It must have been really
back
good
then,
music to
anybody
your
did
ears.
this, you could be fired.
Yeah, yeah,
There was no such thing as transgender rights. There was no such thing as gay rights.
yeah.
And so I took a month off of work and got my everything in order. My name changed, bought my whole new wardrobe, and then I came back to work as Rachel. And I had problems with the bathroom before there was a bathroom problem.
Yeah.
That was fun.
We want to hear about that because it's pretty dramatic. And not
Mm-hmm.
that what you've been telling us isn't dramatic, but we take breaks on this show,
Sure.
and it's time for our first break. Thanks to our director for reminding us.
Yep.
So we're going to take a break right away, but folks, we do want, as always, we welcome participation from our viewers, 640-3091. If you want to participate in this discussion or comment or have thoughts on this with what Rachel Booth has been sharing with us, we certainly would welcome you. 640-3091. And we'll be right back after a quick break. welcome the caller. Hi there, we're back, I guess. Thank you. Thank you out there for taking care of us. And I think we have a caller. Let's see who we got. Hello?
Hi.
Hey, caller, you're live on the progress report.
Yes, I'd like to speak to Rachel, please.
Yeah, she's
right
right
ahead.
here. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rachel. I just want to say that I'm proud of you, for you to be on the show, and it's nice hearing your story. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. I
Well,
appreciate
thank you
that.
very much. We appreciate that, and I'm sure Rachel does too. Take some
Thanks for the
courage.
call.
Take some courage to come out where we have our standards for normality. But it's interesting. We now know that sexual identity is not purely binary in this world. That was it. You were straight, or you were gay, and there
Yep,
was
there were two
over
letters,
here and
two
over
letters
here.
on the birth certificate. It was an
you
M
were
or an
male,
F.
you were female, and but now there's a whole spectrum, and transgender people fit within that spectrum, which is now better understood than it has been. Am I right, Rachel?
It is because of Hollywood. We have Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black, first transgender actress in a major role on a TV show. We have Caitlyn Jenner, who I have problems with. But
Oh, I was going to ask you about her.
it's
A transgender woman who supports Trump. I guess she's backed off on that a bit, but
not really, no.
not really.
No.
Jeez, I'm crow.
But,
Get it. But anyhow, any event, when we went to the break, you were talking about the issue, and this is long before we had bills in North Carolina and in other places about, you got to use this bathroom because it's on your birth certificate, no matter who you think you are. Before we had all that, you had your own issues with the bathroom question, and can you tell us about that?
Yes, I did. One of the things that I had to put up with when I came back to work as Rachel, they brought in a so-called expert to talk to the people at my new building on who and what was coming back to work, because they wanted everybody to understand so I could fit
So
in
we're still
better.
back in the early 90s.
This is 91, before I had actually started as Rachel. But she explained everything to them, and some people just still didn't get it. So I had to make a concession when I went to work that if I wanted to go to the bathroom, there were only three female bathrooms in the building that I was on, one on each floor. And if I wanted to go to any one of those, I had to carry around a big red sign saying, "Do not enter." They even put things on the door where I could slide it into the door. I had to go to the bathroom, knock on the door, open it a little bit, announce myself. And then if anyone was in there, I'd say, "Just a minute." And then they'd come out and I'd say, "Okay, nobody in there." I could put my sign on the door, go in, do my business, come out, get my sign, walk back to my desk. 40-year-old senior computer scientist. And I had to stand in the hallway with my little red sign waiting to go into the bathroom.
I was going to ask how that made you feel, but I think you've revealed that with
Pretty
your comment.
much.
It strikes me, I'm trying to put myself back in that time, that might have been an effort to accommodate, not a very ham-handed, insensitive effort to accommodate. And did you see it that way?
It might have been well-intentioned.
And that, I guess that, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I mean, I'm not excusing it, but
Well, I ended up a little bit lucky in this, because some places that I'd heard where people did what I did, they weren't allowed to use the restrooms in the building at all. They had to go down the road to a gas station and go to the bathroom if they needed to go.
imagine
But
treating people like that, and it was considered okay.
it's just
You know,
strange.
That's
but
rough.
there were three things that the women in the building were afraid of. The first was that I was going to ogle them in the ladies' room. Now, everybody's been in a bathroom with stalls in it, and the only way to ogle anybody would be to stand on the toilet and look over the edge and say, "Hey, how are you?" Nobody's going to do that. The second one was that they were afraid that I was going to sexually assault them. I'd been on female hormones for quite some while at that point, and there was no way physically that I could sexually assault anybody. That wasn't going to happen. The third one, which was the saddest and the funniest one, was that they were afraid that I was going to leave AIDS on the toilet seat. Keep in mind the time. Now, that assumed that I was a gay male, and I wasn't. I'd been married twice, have 2 kids. I was not gay, but for all they knew, that's the only reason that I would do this, was to be, I was a gay man and I wanted to be a woman, because all gay men want to be women. It was just absolutely silly.
I'm chuckling. It's not funny, but we were all alive at that time, and I'm not. That's my memory of,
Right.
of what the prevailing attitude
Well,
was.
this goes back way before the Stonewall thing in New York, doesn't it?
No, that was
Yeah.
back in the
70s, maybe?
70s, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so it was well past that, but still, it seems like a long time ago, and we hope things have sort of evolved since then. I don't know whether they
They-
really have.
They
but,
have. Yeah, there are some insurance companies now that will pay for everything that you need for surgeries, just like any other medical
Yeah.
thing. And that's what this is. It's a medical necessity. You have a disconnect between who your brain says you are and who your body says you are.
Yeah.
And it's deadly.
And I was just going to say, and I would point out, it's life-threatening.
It is life-threatening.
Well. So you came out in 1991. You had to deal with this crazy bathroom sign just to take care of necessities. How did things progress as time went on? Did things get better?
They did. I had to, because of the something called the Harry Benjamin Standards of Care, I had to live, work, and socialize for a year in the gender role that I was trying to achieve. That is to ensure that when you get on the surgeon's table, you are not a man trying to become a woman. You're a woman with a little bit extra that has to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Because there were too many people a long time ago that said, I need to have the surgery, and then they have the surgery and they find out that's not what their problem was at all.
Yeah.
And they end up killing themselves. So the last couple months before I went to have my surgery, I changed my sign. I talked them into giving me just a little tiny one instead of the big red one. And I started putting a white piece of paper over it and letters. And I say, come on in, the water's fine. And everybody knew it was me, but
Well,
it
at least
wasn't.
that's humorous.
It was humorous. And every week I changed it to something else. Now, when I came back from having my surgery, I took every one of my little signs and I ripped them up into little pieces, and I left the pieces in every ladies' room in that building. I said, now come and tell me that I can't be in the ladies' room with everybody else,
Yeah.
And nobody did. I still wasn't treated 100% great for the longest while. People would look at me like, you're that thing,
As you were going through this, did you have support groups that helped you? I mean, did you get into an alliance with people who were facing similar problems?
Yes, and that was the first time that I had ever met anybody else like me. Up until this point, I had thought I was the only person in the world that had this problem. I lived outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey, and there was a Philadelphia Transsexual Support Group, it was called. And I used to go to them, and I would, everybody could tell their stories and commiserate and talk about how they found a doctor that could help them with this, or find even a therapist. It took me years to find a therapist who would help me with this, because they all said, it's because your father killed himself when he was young. You just don't want to be a man because of that. And I knew that wasn't right. That wasn't true at all.
Huh.
So I learned an awful lot from that, and I got a lot of help from it as well.
Once you made this decision, and it probably was a momentous one, I can't imagine it would be anything else, to actually come out in 1991, did you have any problems that would lead you to a suicide ideation after that?
Not one.
Not one. So that really was perhaps a life-saving thing for you. Do you feel that way?
I went out into the woods in the middle of the winter in New Jersey with my tent and sleeping bag and a light and a bunch of books on Chinese philosophy. And I said, I'm going to find some wisdom here, find out what I need to do. And everything that I read said, love yourself before you can love anybody else. I didn't even like myself. So how could I do that? That's when it dawned on me, I have to do something. And I made the decision, and when I made that decision, the weight of the world literally lifted off of my shoulders. I never once have, since that time, ever thought of suicide, not even close. I'm who I'm supposed to be. I'm a rabble rouser now because I want to help other people who have gone through this or are going through it, or people that they know, or friends, their family, who don't understand.
So, a couple of things. You have a life of, pretty high level accomplishments, I would say. Dealing in some very high demand. Helping develop a missile system. That's something more I can't imagine doing.
The software for a missile system.
Software for a missile system.
Millions and millions of lines
I
of
can
code.
imagine.
And I understand you are a musician. You have you've had you play some instruments. You sing. Into Chinese philosophy.
And winter camping.
Winter camping. Where do I want to go with this? I'm just interested that you ended up here in northern New Hampshire.
Bob, that was my question. So what brings you? Where's the journey go between Philadelphia and New Hampshire? How do you end up in the North Country of New Hampshire?
Well,
I would think, and I hope to dispel my thought, but I would think that would be the last place you would consider going, and that there would be more urban, metropolitan, forward-thinking places that you'd gravitate to.
there could, but I grew up in a very small town in Ohio. I just finished my second book, which is about the history of that town.
Oh, you've written more than one book.
And I'm working on my third.
No kidding.
But my wife and I met a wonderful woman a couple years after I transitioned, and we've been together ever since, 23 years now. And she used to come up here with her parents all the time from New Jersey, and they would do winter sports and stuff up here, and we would too. And in 2005, I got gravely ill. Turned out I had been bitten by a tick, and it gave me, among other things, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And I very nearly died from it. I was in a coma for 5 days. I had to learn to walk again and talk again when I came out of the coma. They expected me to die, and I didn't. But it affected me badly enough that I had to retire early. And we had already built a house up here. We were going to come up. I was going to become a teacher. I have a second-degree black belt in martial arts. I was going to open a martial arts school for women up here. I was going to have a second career up here. And I couldn't work, so we said, okay, let's go now. And the people up here are a lot friendlier than they are in New Jersey. Up here, they wave at you with all of their fingers. So we thought, okay, let's go up here, and we've been up here since 2006, and we love it up. We love it up here.
Great, great. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help other people that are facing the kind of identification crisis that you face. What are some of your activities? I mean, you're doing a lot of things. I mean, you're writing books, you're doing music, but tell us about that.
Yeah, I started a transgender support group for the North Country. It's called the North Country Transgender Support Group on Facebook. I'm very active in the Transgender New Hampshire group. After I transitioned in New Jersey, I used to go to universities and colleges and speak on transgender issues so people could understand more. That's something I haven't been able to do up here because of recuperating from the illness that I had.
Uh-huh.
Also because I'm not really known up here, and I was there.
Yeah. Would you like to be more known up here?
Absolutely. Because to me,
As evidenced by the fact that you're here with us.
I can't do enough to help people who are going through what I went through. I know what that was like. I know how awful, how horrible that life was. How there was a tunnel, there was no light at the end of it. and all you could see was that darkness. And I don't want anybody to go through that.
And we got to remember that this starts in childhood. These are kids
Absolutely.
that are in school and in high school and in college that are going through this by themselves, very alone. Now, I think times have changed a little bit. I think more people, maybe not enough, more people are talking about these issues, understanding hopefully a little bit more about these issues. But I don't know how much that helps when you're going through it yourself as a kid.
Well, I'm really, really happy to hear outside of Boston, for instance, every summer they have a camp for transgender kids. Kids can go to these camps and they can be who they are, not who everybody says they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's a lot of people, mostly religious, who say this is child abuse. You're putting bad thoughts in kids' heads and you're confusing them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. I knew that I was a girl. Just as an aside, when I was in the Navy, I had to get my birth certificate because they were going to get us diplomatic passports. I sent home for my birth certificate and I showed it to everybody at the personnel department and they all started laughing. And I said, well, I don't understand what's so funny. Is this you, really? I said, yeah. And then he pointed out to me, my 1951 birth certificate in the gender column says FE. It says that I was female when I was born in 1951. Either that or I had a lot of iron in my body, you know. I chose to see that.
How do you account for that? Was it
I have no idea. No idea. I had all the parts that every little kid, every little boy was supposed to have. And I had no idea that there was, that it was even there.
I don't know that we can do this, but oh God,
Yeah.
I just hold this up to the camera. This is a picture. Rachel's book, Wishing on a Star, has an interesting series of photographs right in the center. And this one is apparently the only picture she has of her graduation from high school when she wasn't Rachel,
That was
at
Ricky.
least by name.
Right.
She was always Rachel in reality, but not by name. It's just a fascinating account of a life of great accomplishment too, I have to say. Well, we're ready to take our final break, and when we come back, we want to bring this discussion back to the current political climate and how passionately she may feel about what's happening today with our national leadership. And we had one very nice call come in, a very brief one, and we would welcome more. If anybody wants to call us and talk with Rachel or us about the subject of transgender people and whether they should have full equal rights, which we of course think they should, the number is 640-3091, and we hope to hear from you, and we'll be right back. Okay, folks, this is the progress report for August 30th. Last edition of the progress report before we get to the big Labor Day weekend coming right up. And if you've been with us, you know we're having what I think is a fascinating discussion with a person of considerable accomplishments and great courage, Rachel Booth, who started her life as a male, served in the U.S. Navy as a male when she knew in her heart that she was a female, and finally came out in 1991 after her military career and a career as a computer programmer and a very important part of our defense establishment, and now lives up in northern New Hampshire with her wife. By the way, I'm interested. You say your partner is your wife. What does your wife call you?
Her wife.
So, you each
Yeah.
call each other wife.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just was wondering.
She
about
called me husband, I'd smack her.
I
And if I called her husband, she'd smack me.
Okay, I just wanted to straighten that up.
We are married.
You are married.
Yes, we
Actually,
are.
married under New Hampshire law?
We are legally married. We had a commitment ceremony in 1995 in New Jersey, and that's why. And we've considered ourselves married ever since.
Okay. Well, I'm very proud to say that New Hampshire has its faults, but we were the first state to authorize same-sex marriages without a court order compelling it to be done.
Excellent,
The
yeah.
legislature did that on its own. And I know you ran for the legislature previously, and I hope someday you will again. I just wanted to show one more picture from Rachel's book, if you can get it here. This is this one over here is the last picture taken of Rachel when she was still known as Ricky.
I was a department manager then.
The department manager, the caption
You
says,
kind of look like a computer department manager in that picture, by the way. I have to
Mea
say.
culpa.
Back in the '80s, I worked for Digital, and we had a few department managers, and that's kind of the look that they brought with that.
but I kind of wanted to turn to a little bit about the broader aspects of the issue you're discussing with us, Rachel. I think it's attributed to Martin Luther King. It's the famous saying, the arc of justice bends very slowly, but when it does bend, it bends towards justice. And it's a wonderful quote, and I've always wanted to believe that was true. And with regard to so many things, civil rights for people of color and so many things, it looked like that was happening, especially when we elected Barack Obama the president, and he finally got around to doing some good things for people who are transgender, as you are.
Yeah.
And now we have a wholly different administration, and like the arc of justice isn't bending toward justice anymore. And it must be distressing to you. I know that's why you came down and spoke to the rally. But you want to talk about that, and whether you think we're going to overcome this current effort to. I mean, we had a distinguished military career, and here you are facing a commander in chief who says, if he has his way, you would never be able to serve.
Absolutely. When Obama said that transgender people could now serve openly in the military, I cried when I heard that. I cried because people like me were not going to have to serve in silence, like I had to. I cried because I thought my country was finally moving forward and becoming a real caring country. And I cried because partially that people were going to be able to live in the military the way that I always wanted to, and I was never going to be able to. But when Donald Trump turned this around, I heard about it driving home from the golf course, and I screamed at the radio and stopped on the side of the road. And I've been screaming ever since. This man, who has never served a day in his life, got
Right.
several deferments, feels that it's his right to say that people like me who served our country honorably, people like me who are serving our country honorably, shouldn't be able to do that. And right now, the general rule of thought for these people is, for some reason, that people are going to flock to join the military just so that they can have their gender confirmation surgery.
That's what I had heard. I
Wow.
was
Right.
trying to understand, what does the opposition, why is this group being singled out? and I had actually heard that from people that it's the cost of the surgery, and
Right.
that seems to be what they feel the issue is. And I
Absolutely ridiculous. The government paid $84 billion in 2014 for Viagra. The cost of any kind of medical procedures or treatments for transgender service members is estimated at anywhere from $4 to $8 million.
and that's total throughout the services.
Yes, throughout the
That's
services.
astounding. Consider
Right.
those two statistics.
Right. And yet they turn it around, and because of their own fake news, they've gotten everybody to believe this. Now, when you sign your life on that dotted line, you sign your life over to the military to go wherever they tell you to go. I knew going into the Navy during Vietnam was probably my best bet not to be able to go any place to get shot at or to shoot at people, but that didn't mean they were never going to send me. And I had to put up with that. If they said, get over there, you're going to be on a PBR going down a river patrol boat going down a river being shot at and shooting into the jungles, I would have had to go, period. And I signed up to do that. Now, anybody who thinks that people would go into the service and sign that piece of paper to put their lives in mortal danger at any given time just so that they can get surgery is out of their mind.
Especially now that the commitment, we have two wars going on, or at least one, and some sort of an action in Iraq. People are going into harm's way, serving multiple tours of duty. I mean, the chances are very good that you're going to be in active
They're
duty,
very good.
in an active combat. So,
That
and
is
what can you quote that number again? Was how many billions for Viagra?
It was $84 billion for Viagra. Now, is that
That
medically necessary?
That can't possibly be right.
It is.
84 million. It must be million.
Maybe it was million.
Yeah, it's got to be million.
It
I
might
mean-
have been million. I'm
mean,
sorry if I
Viagra is
misspoke. Yeah,
not that pricey. I mean,
but there's a lot of it sold. That's
there's a lot
the
of it sold.
problem. And
But
that's
84 million
considered-
still makes your point.
and that's considered medically necessary,
Hmm.
and it's not. Getting help for transgender issues is medically necessary.
Let me ask this: since President Obama changed the rules, the military has accepted those changes and implemented, done quite a bit to implement a new way of doing business to allow these rules.
As
to
they
take
have
effect.
for gay Americans that want to serve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my question is, I'm not trying to say it was an imposition. That's not my point. My question is, how many do you know transgender service members do we now have? I've heard numbers in several thousands.
Yeah.
As many as I believe 12,000 if you include the reserves and the National Guard.
Right.
That's no small number. How does an order or a tweet like and subsequent executive order affect their lives in the military? I mean, I have to imagine that suddenly everything's different for them.
It most
Even though it
certainly is.
hasn't been implemented, nevertheless, it's a different day.
There's a trans man who is in the Army, I believe, serving in Afghanistan, several tours of duty, decorated soldier, and he's transgender. And even though his service record says he's female, they allow him to serve as a male. If this passes, he may very well get kicked out of the military with less than an honorable discharge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they
That-
haven't said what they're going to do yet. But, if you're kicked out for medical reasons, that's a medical discharge. That's not an honorable discharge. And that could very well be what they kick them out for.
So you told us earlier in the program, Rachel, about the you had to endure some very uncomfortable times in the Navy with your shipmates talking about what they were going to do with prostitutes and things like that.
I gotta suppose that hasn't really changed.
That's what I was
I'm sure it
wondering.
hasn't.
If that hasn't changed, it's still going to be difficult for transgender people in the military, right?
And that is a problem because a trans man who hasn't had really any surgery, and you don't have to be a trans man. You're a man. You just happen to have the body of a woman. you're in with other men, and men are going to, there are plenty of men who are going to say, we're going to show you what it means to be a woman. And that person is going to be in mortal danger.
Real danger, I should
Real
think.
danger.
Yeah. So this really depends on the command structure in our services to be alert to this and to protect the people that they
And-
serve under them.
That's true, but just like implementing gay people being able to serve openly, it's going to take a little while before there are no trouble
Yeah.
with it. But the one good thing about the military is the military says, you're going to do this. They're going to do
Yeah.
it.
After all, it was during the Truman administration that we integrated the armed services
Exactly.
to accept people of color, Negroes. Yeah.
And that was a problem for
It was
years.
a problem. But the military, I think, is probably doing better than most parts of our society, even today, in treating people equally, because they all salute the same flag and they all have to
right.
salute the same officers. And
But I still saw segregation in the Navy when I was in. I'd see
Yeah.
the black people all sit with each other, the white people all sit with each other.
yeah,
Well, we're getting toward the end of the show, but
We're very close.
I'd like to kind of we've talked at great length, and I've learned so much today just recounting the story of your life. But going forward, we're in troubled times right now. We have an administration that seems to be hostile to the growing civil rights movement. What do you think? What do we need to keep in mind? What do
we need to
progressive
do?
people need to do? What do you see for the future to get us through this?
Well, what I told people at the transgender rights rally at the very end of it, and I know this is difficult, but the time for transgender people to be silent, melding into the background, and just taking what comes is over. We're just like the gay community was 10, 20 years ago. We have to stand up, we have to shout, we have to say, we are here, get used to it, we're not going away, and this is who we are. Learn to understand who we are, and let us be who we're supposed to be. You understand now that gay people are born gay. It's not a choice. Being transgender is not a choice. I was born this way.
yeah. It always amused me and distressed me that people would say, "Ah, you made a choice." Who would make a choice to be a member of a despised minority?
Exactly.
I was a very young kid when I came to that conclusion. It
Yeah,
didn't
I
seem
mean,
to me
exactly.
like an attractive choice, and I haven't been dissuaded of that since then. I hope that we can get rid of the despised community portion of that equation and move forward with this. But it's very difficult when you have a situation where someone cannot understand. As much as I try to understand, I don't believe I can fully understand it because that's not the life that I've led.
Right.
Can you kind of help enlighten us, help us understand a little bit better, to be empathetic to someone who we may not really identify with as closely as others?
There's a term for people who are born with the mind and body in total agreement. That's cisgendered, CIS gendered. That means that you were born with a male brain, you have a male body, you're happy being male, you've never thought any other thing. It would be horrible for you to lose your penis because that's who you are. That's part of your identity. There are people who are born with a brain that operates as the opposite sex from their bodies. People don't understand that because they don't have a frame of reference for it. My analogy for that is trying to explain to somebody who's never been able to see colors, never been able to see since the day they were born, what colors look like. They might understand it on the surface, but they have no frame of reference of what that actually is. And somebody who is cisgendered has no idea, no frame of reference for being born with a brain that says I'm a girl and a body that says I'm supposed to be a boy, or vice versa.
That's a very interesting and insightful comment.
But I would think that there's some obligation to at least try to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. At least try to be sympathetic to the situation and understand that as much as you just can't understand it, and as much as it baffles you, you at least you can't put that on the other person. That's your issue. You know, that's what I would think would be where we need to go with this.
Rachel, we're pretty much out of time, but have you got any website or anything you'd like to suggest for people who want to help you push back against this Trump initiative to again ban transgender people from military service?
Well, you can always go to TGNH, Transgender New Hampshire. It's a Facebook page. You can get involved in that. You can go to my website, which is North Country Transgender Support Group. You can join PFLAG, which is also a group that works with gay and LGBTQ people who are friends to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You can read. You can learn.
Mm-hmm.
You can read my book. That'll help an awful lot. Because,
I'm gonna want to read your book
Yeah.
for sure.
because I put 12 years of my life into that book, and I really wanted to help people with it.
Where is this book available generally?
Yes, it's available on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble as well.
Yeah. Wishing on a Star: My Journey Across the Gender Divide by Rachel Evelyn Booth. And I'm certainly going to get a hold of that, and thank you for bringing it down. Thank you for coming down and joining us. It's been a really interesting discussion to wind up our summer here on the Progress Report.
Thanks to our caller.
I have one, thanks to our caller, and I hope others who did not call enjoyed this show as well. I just wanted to mention one thing, that the annual bike tour sponsored by the Manchester Conservation Commission is up for September 10th. Great event, low cost, fun to see the city by bike, and I'll talk more about that next week. Next week, Mike will be off leading the Hibernians as he does, except in the summer months when they take a vacation, I guess. And I'll be here with Senator Lou D'Alessandro, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And again, thank you, Rachel, for participating. It was a really fascinating program. Take care, folks.